Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We are really glad to have you with us today because we are tackling a subject that is, quite frankly, the single biggest emotional paradox in the entire world of social care. It's a concept that stops most people from even signing up to do the job in the first place.
It's the success paradox, isn't it? That fundamental contradiction.
Exactly. It's this idea that you spend months, maybe even years, building a bond, creating safety, loving a child, and doing everything in your power to make them feel secure, only to have the ultimate definition of success be them walking out your front door.
And usually, never coming back to live.
Today, we are looking at transitions. We're talking about moving a child on, whether that's to adoption, long-term fostering, or back to their birth family. We have pulled together a stack of really compelling sources today, including carer stories from ISP Fostering and some very detailed agency guides from the Family Care Group and Capstone.
And honestly, having been a foster carer in the British system for over a decade now, despite this American accent, I can't seem to shake. This is the topic that keeps people up at night. It really is.
I can't tell you how many times people have said to me, at dinner parties, I could never foster, I'd get too attached, I couldn't handle the goodbye. And today, we're going to look at why that heartbreak isn't a bug in the system, it's actually the feature.
So let's unpack this. We're going to look at the head, the logistics, the regulations, the transition plan that I deal with as a social worker, and we're going to look at the heart, which is your domain, the grief, the empty house, and how you actually survive the silence after they leave.
Sounds like a plan. Where do we start?
We have to start with the goal. I think there's a massive misconception about what short-term fostering actually means. In the UK, if you sign up as a short-term carer, people assume that means, what, a weekend? 2 weeks?
Yeah, people think it's babysitting. But short-term in fostering speaking is a technical term. It just means not permanent.
Yeah.
I've had short-term placements that lasted 2.5 years. Exactly. It just means the child isn't staying until they are 18. The objective, written in black and white on the local authority care plan, is almost always reunification, getting them back to birth parents or permanency, which usually means adoption or a long-term foster placement.
Which means from the very moment that child walks through your door with their bin bag or their little suitcase, your job is to prepare them to leave. You are building a home for them, knowing that the structural integrity of that home is designed to launch them somewhere else.
And that is such a hard mental switch to flip. The sources, specifically the guides from Capstone and Family Care Group, are very clear on this. A child leaving isn't a failure of the placement, it is the completion of the placement. But does it feel like that when you're in it?
Rarely. I mean, intellectually.
Yeah.
You know you're a bridge. You're getting them from a place of crisis to a place of safety. But emotionally, it feels like losing a family member. It feels like an amputation. But here is the key insight, and this is something that came up in the ISP Fostering source, specifically looking at the story of a carer named James.
James's story was incredibly moving.
It was. And it highlights what I call the heartbreak rule. If you're sitting there thinking, I can't foster because I get too attached, you need to flip the script. If you don't get attached, you aren't doing it right.
Say more about that, because that sounds counterintuitive to self-preservation.
It is. But you have to remember who the client is here. The client is the child. These kids often come from backgrounds where adults were dangerous, inconsistent, or just absent. They have what psychologists call disorganized attachment. They need to experience a secure attachment cycle, having a need, expressing it, and having an adult meet it consistently to rewire their brains.
So if you hold back, if you protect your own heart to avoid the pain of the goodbye,
you're depriving the child of the one tool they need for the future. The child needs to know they are lovable. If they leave your home and you don't cry or you don't feel a sense of loss, then they probably didn't feel that deep connection they needed to heal. The sentiment is basically, if your heart doesn't break when they leave, you didn't do the job properly.
that is a heavy burden to carry, though. You are essentially signing up to be hurt.
You are. You are volunteering to take the hit so the child doesn't have to. James in the article talks about this mix of emotions. Pride, because look at how far this child has come. Anxiety, because you worry about them. But ultimately, happiness. You are sending a child out into the world or to a new family better than they arrived. That's the win.
And to get to that win, we have to go through the process. And this is where my side of things. It's a mechanism called observation to participation. The agency guides describe it really well. Days 1 to 3, the new parents are just shadows. They watch you, the foster carer, do everything. They watch how you feed the baby, how you soothe them, the specific song you sing at bath time.
And that is so weird, by the way. Having strangers in your living room taking notes on how you burp a baby.
Yeah.
You feel like you're being audited.
But it's vital because the child looks to you for safety. This is social referencing. If you signal that these new people are okay, the child starts to believe it. If you are tense, the child is tense.
Exactly. You're going to be the coolest cucumber in the salad, even if you're freaking out inside. Then, around day 4 or 5, it shifts. You start to step back, you let the doctor hold the bottle, but you're right there.
And this is where the head and the heart really collide. Because as a foster carer, your instinct honed over months of caring for this child is to swoop in.
Oh, it's physical. If the baby cries and the new dad is fumbling with the buttons on the baby grow, or they aren't mixing the formula exactly the way you do, every fiber of your being wants to say, here, let me do it.
But you can't.
You have to sit on your hands. This is the emotional discipline we talked about. You have to physically and emotionally step back in your own home. You are literally transferring the child's trust from you to them. You have to make yourself, well, a bit boring. You have to let the adopters become the source of comfort.
There's a specific beat in the transition plan where the foster carer stops being the doer and becomes the observer. It's a psychological maneuver. You are fading yourself out of the picture to allow the new bond to form.
And it feels terrible. You feel like you're abandoning them while you're still in the room. But the Family Care Group guide is very clear. This is about the child's long-term success, not your short-term comfort. If you interfere, you undermine the new parents.
The Family Care Group source also mentions how important it is to prepare the child for this, even if they are young. You can't just spring it on them.
Absolutely. Age-appropriate honesty. There's a misconception that you should protect kids from the truth until the last minute. That is actually damaging. Kids are smart. They sense the tension. If you don't give them a narrative, they invent one. And it's usually that they've done something wrong.
So what do you say?
You tell them, this is your forever family. I was just the safe place for a while, but this is where you're going to grow up. You have to frame it as a positive step. Even if inside you're absolutely crumbling, you have to sell it.
And that brings us to the artifact, the physical thing that bridges the gap, the memory box.
Oh, the memory box. This isn't just a scrapbook, is it?
No. In the UK regulations, this is essentially mandatory. It's often called life story work. You have to remember, children in care often have fragmented histories. They move from birth home to maybe an emergency placement, to a short-term placement, to adoption. They lose chunks of their timeline.
They don't have those continuous stories that we take for granted. You know, oh, remember when you were 2 and you dropped the ice cream at the seaside? If nobody was there to remember it, for the child, it's like it didn't happen.
Exactly. Without those memories, they struggle to form a coherent identity. They feel like they just happened. So the foster carer's job is to keep the timeline intact. The sources emphasize that this box needs to be tangible.
It has to be real stuff, not just a USB drive with photos. We're talking about the outfit they came home from the hospital in, a drawing they made that you stuck on the fridge, a shell from that trip to the beach, maybe a certificate from school.
And what's the underlying message of that box?
The message is, you weren't just a case number. You weren't just in the system. You were in a family. You were loved. When they look back at that box in 10 years, or when they are 20, they need to see proof that they were cherished. It grounds them.
The Family Care Group suggests creating a goodbye ritual too, a special dinner or a party if they're older, something that marks the end of the chapter.
Closure is huge. We need it as adults. Kids need it too. We usually do a special meal, their favorite food. It's a way of saying, we celebrate you, and we are sending you off with full bellies and full hearts.
It marks the boundary between here and there.
But then they leave. The social worker drives away. The new parents take the car seat, and the door closes.
And that is the silence.
Let's talk about that. The empty house.
It is deafening. You've had this chaos, this noise, social workers coming and going, the intense energy of the introductions, and then boom, silence. You walk past their bedroom door and the bed is stripped, the toys are gone, it's just a room again.
The Coping with Goodbyes source talks about the guilt that comes with that.
You feel guilty for being sad. You think, I should be happy. They've gone to a forever family. They're safe. This is what we wanted. But grief doesn't care about logic. It feels like a bereavement.
It is a bereavement. It's a unique kind of grief, what clinicians call disenfranchised grief. Because the child is alive and happy, society expects you to just move on. People say, oh, well done, great result. And you want to scream because you miss the weight of them on your hip. You miss the noise. James in the ISP article nailed it. He talked about missing the small things, just talking to them, seeing them around. And that feeling can last a long time.
This is where we have to pivot to self-care. And I don't mean bubble baths and scented candles. We're talking about physiological regulation.
No, we're talking about survival.
The ISP source makes a distinction between self-care and survival care. And the agencies, like Family Care Group, are quite strict about this. You usually need a break.
The rule of the break. You cannot and should not take another placement the next day. You can't pour from an empty cup. If you bring a new traumatized child into a house that is thick with the grief of the last one, you are setting everyone up for failure.
I always advise my carers to take at least a few weeks. You need to reset the house.
You have to cleanse the palette. We usually paint the room. It sounds practical, but it's symbolic. You strip the bedding, you change the color of the walls. You are reclaiming the space and neutralizing the energy so that the next child comes into a fresh environment, not a shrine to the previous one.
And you need to sleep. The emotional exhaustion of a transition is physical. You feel like you've run a marathon.
You really do. And you need to debrief. That's a formal part of the process here in the UK. Your supervising social worker will sit down with you. What went well? What was hard?
And you have to be honest in those debriefs.
If you're wrecked, say you're wrecked. There's a quote from the Attachment and Trauma Network source that I love. Therapeutic parenting is not for wimps.
It really isn't. It's an elite sport.
It requires this immense energy to regulate a traumatized child. So recharging isn't a luxury. It's a professional responsibility. If you burn out, you're no good to the next child who needs you.
I think that's such a crucial point. Fostering is a profession, even if it happens in your living room. And part of being a professional is managing your own capacity.
Absolutely. And allowing yourself to feel the loss. We've had kids move over. We still talk about them years later. Oh, remember when so-and-so did this?
Yeah.
They become part of the fabric of your family history, even if they aren't at the dinner table anymore.
And does goodbye always mean forever?
Not anymore. It used to. But modern social work recognizes that severing ties completely can be damaging. James mentioned in his story that he's still in touch with one of his long-term placements, who is now 21 and owning a business.
That's usually done through letterbox contact, right?
Traditionally, yes, you exchange letters once or twice a year via the agency. But more and more, adopters are open to direct contact. Maybe a WhatsApp group, maybe a meetup once a year. It's messy, but it's healthier. It shows the child they don't have to delete their past to have a future.
So, to synthesize what we've looked at today, fostering is essentially about being a bridge. You are a sturdy, safe structure that helps a child get from a place of crisis, where their world has fallen apart, to a place of permanence.
And a bridge has to be strong enough to handle the traffic, but it doesn't get to keep the cars. The cars cross over and keep going. And the pain of that goodbye, that is simply the price of the love the child needed to heal. You pay that price so they don't have to.
That is beautifully put.
It's the hardest job you'll ever love.
Now, if you are listening to this and thinking, I think I could be that bridge, or even if you're just on the fence and want to understand the reality of it a bit more, we have put a link in the description below.
It's worth reading.
The Family Care Group source mentioned a statistic that is quite worrying. There has been a 10% fall in the number of foster carers across England recently. The shortage is real, and it means kids are being moved out of their local areas simply because there aren't enough beds.
Which just adds to their trauma.
Exactly. There is absolutely no pressure to sign up immediately, but just reading about it, seeing if it fits your life, that's the first step.
And remember, you don't have to be a superhero. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be there.
So here is the final thought we want to leave you with today. It's a provocative one. We live in a world that tells us to protect our hearts, to avoid pain, to seek comfort. We are obsessed with accumulation, keeping people close.
Protectionism of the heart.
But fostering asks you to do the opposite. It asks you to love with your whole chest, knowing from day one that the win condition is an empty room.
Too radical.
So the question is, could you love a child knowing the ultimate goal is to let them go? Because if you can, that might just be the bravest thing a person can do.
Thanks for listening.
See you on the next deep dive.